Hello, Rina. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited to talk to you about yoga philosophy and business and how they can combine. So, when did you start using yoga philosophy as a core in your business?
Yes. So yoga philosophy, when I first started studying yoga, really what I got attracted to, obviously, besides it feeling so good physically, was the yoga philosophy and the deeper teachings. Now, I did start with the Yoga Sutras as learning that part. And then when I did end up finding my teacher years later and going more into the Gita, that's when I think it's always been part of my existence as a yoga teacher. And it wasn't until really maybe like 5 to 10 years ago that I started to be more intentional with making sure that the way that I do my business is infused with the philosophy as well. And so it was kind of like I would thought my yoga philosophy interest and curiosity was more of just like me as a student. And so I was like, I loved it. I like got hooked on it. It was a passion of mine. And then as I started to do the business part and the marketing part, it was like I would feel disjointed and misaligned in certain ways. And I was like, wait, I gotta find a way to bridge this together because it doesn't feel good when I'm doing something this way, but I'm trying to do this. And then basically just took over. And now it's like obviously completely foundational in my practice and my teaching and my business and everything else.
That's awesome. And what does the business model kind of look like differently from when you're excluding these sort of philosophies versus, say, more traditional or what you were doing before?
So before I just thought of it as two separate things that I was trying to align. And I thought that I had to, compartmentalize it, right? So that it was kind of like, well, here's my philosophy study of me trying to be a better person, understanding the teachings. And then, okay, now going off to work, teaching a class or with a client or doing some emails and all of that nitty gritty stuff that you know, takes up a lot of the back end time, right? So what shifted for me was all of a sudden being like, wait a minute, they are not separate. I have to, in order for me to be successful, because the teachings are telling you the definition of success, right? Like just obviously the three C's to success: consistency, cooperation, and concentration. So this is where it became a lot of it of besides all the other principles, it was paramount for me to sit there and figure out how do I do business. So my business model might be the same physically of what my action steps are, but how I do them are different. And how the response to me is different, right? So in terms of if somebody doesn't like my class or they do like my class, it's no longer wavering based on other people's opinions of my practice or my style. It's more of me understanding my truth, understanding my niche, understanding the gift I have, and then offering it up and being of service. And if somebody doesn't want my service, great. Somebody does want my service, great. So it becomes so it just feels the feeling, the thought, the feeling, and the experience is all from that higher place. So it's not exactly what I'm doing business wise, but how I'm doing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And have you seen your business in terms of any like success or anything transform through that? Or is it more just how and the way that you're approaching it and how you're thinking about it?
So both, because think about it. If I'm calmer, more grounded, more clear, more organized, more like I have a goal, but I'm not focusing on the result as much, right? So I'm not like putting up a post and being like, how many people like it, right? Like it's not so much about that external or that result oriented, complete approach, which is 99.9% of people who are in business. What are we looking for? Profits, right? We're looking for signups. We're looking for money. We're looking for, that return on our effort. So by shifting it, where obviously, yes, we all need money to pay bills and do certain things. But since my focus has shifted now on like, okay, doing what I ought to do, doing it to the best of my ability, and understanding that things may succeed, may not succeed, even after 24 years of doing this, being in this industry, it makes me calmer through the process. makes me be able to see more clearly as to what I need to adjust to maybe fix the issue at hand, if it's something I can do, or if it's something different with the audience or the people that I'm trying to reach. In addition to, ultimately, by not being result oriented, think about okay, so the difference with result oriented versus duty oriented, DUTY. When we are result oriented, it's the phrasing of, when I get this, I'll be happy, to some degree, right? When this happens, I'll be happy. So if that thing you need to have has to happen for you to be happy, then you are not whole already, right? There's an emptiness, there's a void. So you feeling that void, waking up in the morning with the void, doing your activities with the void, going to the class feeling that, teaching your students feeling that, and then going home feeling that, and then your practice feeling that, there's always going to be a sense of not enough. So in that state, you're not as effective and efficient as you could be. It's not possible because you're emotional and triggered. So by being result oriented, when I get this, I'll be happy, which we all know doesn't really bring, even when you get that, we don't have lasting happiness, it's temporary. We flip that from, I am happy, or I am doing what I ought to do, and that's providing me the fulfillment. Now I'm no longer seeking the 50 people to be in my class for my happiness. So my connection to each person, whether it be like the usher when I went to see the Curb Your Enthusiasm panel last week, right? At a theater, where I was like, so, it's like, hey, how are you? Thank you so much. He's like, you're so friendly. I'm like, you're so friendly. You're interacting with, and he's like, what's your name? I'm like, Rina, what's your name? He's like, David. I'm like, nice to meet you, right? Like, it's just genuine interaction with a human being that it just already elevates it, right? So there's something I'm want from that person, right? Like, are you going to do my teacher training, right? There's not like I'm seeking something for it, but it's a totally different approach when you come from that perspective. And it just also feels better, right? Like, you just feel good. So those two approaches, duty oriented versus result oriented, is very important, because when the success starts to come automatically, because you're already feeling full. When you already feel full, the universe does, here you go, you can handle this. But if you're always in that void, we are perpetuating the void. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. If there's anyone listening that wants to try on, which I'm sure there's lots of people, since we're all yoga teachers still listening, that wants to sort of start maybe switching to that sort of duty orientated rather than results driven, is there any sort of like check-ins you'd recommend that people do to themselves, or like, because I'm sure there'd be like a transition where you're like flipping from, oh, but I need that many classes to pay the bills this week, into actually that's going down the wrong path, and then how do I flip that around again?
So that's a good question. Now, this is where we've all been telling ourselves, we've all had scripts that we've written many years ago that we keep repeating in our heads, right? This happens, you think this, you say this, right? So we've had these internal scripts or stories that we say. So part of the check-ins is like, do you have a philosophy study background? Most of the time with teacher trainings, they cover it for like an hour or two, and that's it, right? Like, people have hired me to teach the philosophy section of their teacher training. I'm there for 2 hours, and then I'm like, oh, so what else are you guys going to do for philosophy? They're like, nothing else, you're it. I'm like, what? Nah. Right? Like, different strokes for different folks, no big deal. But I also know the nectar of what keeps pumping you and giving you purpose as a teacher is the philosophy, because it's an endless abyss of what wisdom, knowledge, connection. So one is, do you have a philosophy study background or a regimen or discipline? If you don't, I highly recommend you start, because it starts to make you think differently, right? And then while you start to think differently, you can catch yourself in that script of, I gotta teach these classes and I gotta pay, like that downward spiral of the anxiety around the teaching that keeps you limited. So I work with a lot of yoga teachers who want to learn how to expand their vision of what it means to be a yoga teacher. A yoga teacher is not just somebody who goes to a yoga studio and teaches a class. You immediately become an entrepreneur. And you got to realize that it takes hustling. It takes a certain level of awareness and understanding of how everything is an opportunity and create opportunities for yourself. So by shifting your perspective, it's going to make a whole world of difference of I could teach over here and I could charge this. You just start to see your career very differently than just teaching class coming home, teaching class coming home. Because yeah, at $30 a pop for, 10 classes a week, you're not making $300 a week, ain't gonna cut it. It's just not. So and that's realistic. So I'm not saying not to be goal oriented in a certain way, but it's very different than results driven. You're propelling yourself to go deeper with the philosophy. And the check-ins are also being honest with yourself of like, I don't have that. I am very much results driven. And you can think of it the other way. If you have anxiety, stress, or any of those negative emotions that you carry around your teaching, that is usually an indication of result oriented, right? There's not going to be a joy and a freedom in how you approach what you teach. But this is like a lifelong journey. So checking in with yourself daily. Am I being kinder to myself? Am I being more patient? Am I able to adapt? What am I missing? Like, what have I not seen that I could be doing with my career? That I'm just, where's that limit? Where am I limiting myself? And it's by asking those questions, you start to expand a little bit more your mind of how to step further into it. But I will say, and this is why, if you've never had a mentor, mentors are really, really powerful because they can help you figure out those little pockets, those blind spots that we don't, the reason they're called blind spots is because we can't see them. So maybe there's a teacher in your community or, somebody who you trust or someone you connect with who you can ask for some guidance on that, because that usually is a helpful place of like, oh, you haven't thought about this. Oh, you haven't thought about this. I mean, it's hard to just have a few check-ins because it's so much like just study, study, study. Be hungry for the knowledge. Really, truly be a student and then take your time to digest it before you spit it out to your students. Like assimilate the knowledge and like really chew on it and connect the dots. So you're not just a parrot in a yoga class saying all the nice things that all the yoga teachers say, which is great, but be the person who actually is trying to embody it. You don't have to actually embody it, but you can just be on the pursuit and the journey of it, which is very genuine and authentic and transparent. So people appreciate that when you're able to speak from that place.
Do you have any tips on when you are diving into the ancient wisdom and then how to unpack it and understand it and start embodying it rather than, as you said, just being a carrot?
Good question. So the first thing is to find a teacher or a translation of the text that you resonate with. My teacher, Parthasarathi, is like the best, most logical, down-to-earth, clear explanation of the Gita. I mean, I've read a lot of yoga books and a lot of philosophy books, and he is just right to the point and A plus B equals C and black and white. There's no out like woo-woo things that make us like, wait, what spin? And it's not academic. So it's also it's not dense that way. So I'm happy to like show you the link and send that to you so people can look that up. But vedantaworld.org in case you wanted to look it up while you're listening. But he is really good. And his first book, The Fall of the Human Intellect, is like that's the first book that he recommends you read on the journey so that you can start to get used to it. It's really thin, it's nothing too big. So that's super helpful in terms of when you read the philosophy, you're going to ask yourself 3 questions. The first question is, how does this relate to the world? Right? Like you pick up like one sentence. How does this relate to the world? Can I see the connection? The second is, how does this relate to me? So you go, okay, he says that the mind wreaks havoc and the mind is made up of my emotions. Okay, well, I can see that. My emotions literally right before this podcast, I was very frustrated because I had done a flyer for a long time and I wanted some advice from somebody. And then he just like kind of like, pooped on it a little bit in my observation. And I was like, I've spent so much time. Just like give me constructive feedback. Don't just say it, like help me. Right. So guess what? Yep. That was a frustration. My emotions got the best of me. The mind wreaked havoc, and that created stress. 1 + 1 = 1 = 3, right? And so I reflect on it back on myself. How does this relate to me? And then the third aspect of, so those are meant to be like a little bit, so how does this relate to the world is obviously more objective and you see it from a witness. How does this relate to me is obviously making it more personalized. And then the third question is being able to see yourself in the world acting it out. So you kind of, how do I see myself in the world acting this way versus how does it relate to me, just like the nut and bolt of it. But then you go one step further to be like, how have I acted this way or seen this for myself in the world? That makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah, like how do I actually practice it?
Well, how,
Or how have I?
how have I seen this happen in my past or in my life that then when I'm confronted with a new situation, I could maybe have a different response. But it's meant to, like, you see it like a movie. So as these things, you're going to get triggered by some of the language because that's the nature of it, not because he's trying to trigger you, but because we're defensive and we're emotional. So allowing yourself to sit back and try to like understand what the author is trying to say without it being too literal and too black and white, because that's part of what gets us caught up. So I would recommend The Fall of the Human Intellect as a book to start with. Or if you wanted more layman's terminology about it, then actually Emotional Empowerment Movement by Eric Pascal, which is my husband. It's a compilation of the teachings, but in very layman's terms and like bad words. And then there's a workbook in there that yours truly helped with a lot. And then, so there's two different, if you wanted to go more, traditional sounding Sanskrit words, that then you have The Fall of the Human Intellect. If you wanted it to be more relatable to this world right here, right now, with that kind of terminology, and you can try Emotional Empowerment Movement.
We will put the links to those in the show notes as well for everyone. And then I'm guessing you were talking about like tips for not losing your yoga practice. I know that's a common thing that a lot of people when they get started, and especially if they're doing all of these like 30 plus classes a week or whatever, do you give any sort of tips for anyone to try not get swept away with that?
Yes. So, first thing is this, is it's kind of a balance of things to understand about yourself. Is one, this is why the philosophy number one is really important, because even if you can't get on the yoga mat, you can keep deepening yourself philosophically. So by you deepening yourself philosophically, you are practicing yoga. It just doesn't happen to be physical. Like if you can't get around to a class, let's say. So first is that's kind of like the hack, the runaround. If you lose your physical practice, at least you're doing the philosophical practice, which is really going to help you in the end in terms of your inner growth. Now, within that inner growth, you would hopefully like to incorporate some discipline for your physical practice. The truth is that our ability to be kind to ourselves when there's real moments of, okay, I need to take time for myself by not doing yoga practice and taking self-care and knowing that that's okay. But there's a fine line for this, right? Because we could just be giving into the mind being like, oh, you don't have to do it today, just relax. When you know how good it feels to get on your mat, right? So, and I struggle with this too, like transparently, is there's some times that I'm just like between all my, I had shoulder surgery and some injuries and my body's just like, nope, nope, nope. And so it's like restorative yoga is what I'm able to do. And sometimes it even can hurt because I had a hernia, like all these fun things. So finding that balance between knowing, okay, I need to instill discipline, I need to shut up and just get on my mat, accountability being huge, and being kind to yourself. Because even if you do get on your mat when you don't really want to, it's still being kind to yourself, right? So the other thing would also be is get like an accountability buddy. Is if you have somebody that did your teacher training with you or another yoga teacher at the studio, like we're all in it. We used to practice at the times that now we teach. And so we lose that connection, and then now we become a teacher, and then there's like this weird approach to going to classes where maybe you don't want the students to see you as whatever that stupidity is, just like move it aside. Be like, no, I got to get to a class. I got to go to a class. So just show up best you can. If you can't do anything in a whole week, just do one class. The next week, try to do 2 classes. Like, try to create a little bit of a structure for yourself in that way, which can also be give yourself like, hey, for the next 7 days, schedule an outline and just do what you write, like whatever you write down, surrender to that schedule and comply with it until you kind of kick your butt again into gear. Like that's what I do is I create like a schedule. Okay, Rina, it's been too long. You're only going a couple times a week. You got to find a regimen for yourself at home. So I like take out my little schedule. I'm like, okay, Monday I'm going to do it here. Tuesday I'm going to do it this time. And I think about it in advance. It's not a whimsical thing. It's like it should be incorporated like showering every day. Yeah, part of it. Plan it in there.
Yeah, that's good advice. I think I like that there's lots of practical tips. And definitely, I was going to add that don't beat yourself up about missing it as well. Just come back to just starting again, and that's fine. You've missed it, or you can keep going. That doesn't matter about the past. I've been struggling a lot since being 36 weeks pregnant the last few weeks, and I know I should do like at least even 10 minutes and things. And I was talking to some other woman yesterday. I'm also pregnant in our little group, and they were like, I was like, oh yeah, regrets a bit sore, and they're like, oh yeah, I find yoga really helps, and I'm like,
you're like, really?
I was like, thank you for that advice. I was like, yes, I know. Pulled out.
Right. And so, yes, and you're absolutely right that I use like, so if you haven't seen this movie, go see it. Meet the Robinsons from Disney. Totally underrated. Like, it's just a hiding movie that's one of the best. 3 words to live by from that movie. And in this case, as a yoga teacher not practicing, keep moving forward. So you didn't do it today, no big deal. Keep moving forward. You have another opportunity tomorrow.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that. Yes. Cool. So I know, like, you incorporate a lot of philosophy. You mentioned like you've trained philosophy for other YTTs and found that they don't do a lot. You're really focused on philosophy and your business and teaching this to others. When did you start transitioning and teaching this philosophy and this business model to other teachers?
This was like about a year and some ago, a year and a half ago now, I started a program that was helping me really fine tune who I wanted to work with and what was it that I could give, like I had 2 books and I have like, all the teacher trainings in Spanish and English for kids. Like there's a coloring book for kids and there's a YouTube channel for, like, I have all these freaking things. And I just found myself like, there's gotta be something here that like, I know that I have a product that I haven't tapped into yet. And I did kind of like an excavation of who I really wanted to work with and what my passion is, like really truly my calling and my truth and all of it. And so what surfaced was helping yoga teachers like basically do what I've done for 24 years, which is that bridging of the gap of never losing that higher ideal and the philosophy as the foundation for their yoga business. Because I met a lot of yoga teachers who are like, yeah, I'm just not a salesperson. I don't want to do the marketing is icky and all that stuff feels so weird. And I'm like, right, because you're coming at it from a perspective that is, the business minded. And there's a way for you to come at it from the philosophy that then you take the actions differently. And now it's a win-win because there's usually a gap, like yoga teachers I've spoken to who have taken other programs that are, marketing based or business based. They're not yoga teachers. They don't understand how we like want to connect. And there's a subtlety to what we do that is it's so connected. And of course, I wanted to work with yoga teachers because yoga teachers have already done extensive training and gone inwards and dedicated and invested in themselves. And like, there's an archetype, if you will, of a yoga teacher that comes through, and that person is going to be a much better student, believe it or not, obviously, for my program to be able to like say, okay, here we go. You want this. You're looking for this merger. And so it was just a no-brainer. And what's come of it is just so beautiful. Like all the gifts that have come from putting this together, and really like I dove in like woo, in so many ways. And what came out of it was a beautiful thing. So I'm really grateful to be able to offer it because it's not out there. Like I haven't seen that ability to really not just, okay, great. So you sell a product, but it's like, how do you sell it and why? And how do you keep understanding the steps to take in your strategy of everyday, your system, so that you feel like it's a holistic approach. So it's
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah, I really like that because you get sort of the one end of the scale, you've obviously got the really deep marketing business stuff that doesn't really incorporate any kind of philosophy apart from, like you said, sales, and that's the main focus. And then you do get a lot of holistic things, but it's usually very like manifesty and like, it's not, yeah, it's like very high. And then yoga philosophy, like, yes, it's got that sort of airy bit, but it's still very practical when you apply it. And that's the whole design of it, is to be practical in our own lives as beings on this planet. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's really good. Have you seen any? Do you have any favorites in the transformations from any of your students that have started to incorporate this sort of style of model into their businesses?
The thing I love the most about the transformations, first of all, obviously they're all personal, like in terms of their own growth, but what what the most that I've seen that all the participants get to some extent, some, obviously more than others, depending on how they apply it, is the level of clarity and confidence that they gain at the end is so beautiful. Like this one girl this one yoga teacher who was a teacher at a studio, and the studio owner, she taught like 14 classes at the studio. She was like the person that, the head, the one that was in charge of all the things, even though the owner was like a little bit toxic and not very healthy relationship, didn't have a healthy relationship with her and kind of condescended her. So there's a little bit of codependency, if you will, and an unhealthy dynamic. And this yoga teacher felt like she couldn't leave because there was such a dependency. And halfway through the program, she was like, I'm quitting. And I found my own location. So she started her own space, her own studio, her own thing. She's got herself an A-frame, and she has her like she totally went like 180 from codependent to independent. And like within 8 weeks, being able to do that for yourself shows the power of the philosophy, because that's why I bring in the philosophy. Her doing those steps without the philosophy is just the actions, the superficial actions, but she's going to fall back into her pattern if she doesn't have the foundation through which to maintain it. Right. So that's one example as of just like, to use that one. But then another one being another girl who was also, she was teaching in a bunch of different places, and she was wanting to open up a space as well, and she didn't know how to do it. And she was a little bit, like confused in how take the steps for herself. And ultimately she pulled the trigger, and she did partner up with somebody that I highly recommended. No partnerships for those of you who are out there. Not because partnerships aren't important, but there's always it's already ended. The partnership already ended. It's like done, and it was ugly, and there were lawyers. At the end of the day, you can hire people that you're looking that can benefit. Like there's other ways of getting what you need to get without having the partnership, just because you're going to have different visions that collide. But anyway, she ended up like being able to build this whole community, and she sent me this like voice memo message like one morning that I listened to, and I was like how she was explaining, she's like, thank you so much for the structure and the philosophy and the way that you teach us about leadership, because this community is like thriving now, and the people are coming out of nowhere that want to be part of this community. And it's because of the way that you taught the philosophy with this that I can even step into this space, and I feel like I'm strong enough to, because I never would have been able to do this before. And like, it's not me, it's the philosophy. But by infusing it, it gives her the foundation. Because anybody can open up a studio, like the action of doing the studio, but how you open the studio and how you do the steps is what the philosophy brings in.
just really grounding it as the foundation of your business, really. And then that's the whole point of embodying the entire philosophy. If you've got it within your business, your daily life, everything, then you've got that solid backing for yourself that you can trust. And as soon as you set up kind of solid foundations, it's open my house. It's going to help you to like just keep growing, and you can trust in that baseline's going to be there to always support you.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is it infuses in the rest of their lives. Like this one saying about the partnership, she also during the time like broke up with her boyfriend because it was a toxic relationship. Like there's clarity you get on all levels when you're doing this. It's not one single category. And that's part of, I think, what yoga teachers have, is we do have depth, and we want a bigger holistic picture as to how to approach our lives. And unfortunately, we teach, 10 classes a week for $30, can't make ends meet, can't pay the bills. And then we're like, F this, like, I can't do this. And then they feel defeated. And then they have to go get another job. And then they, which sometimes we do. And there's ways of understanding and assessing ourselves as to when we have to do that, if we have to do that. But it just becomes important to at least understand the trajectory of what we could be doing, right? Because it is possible.
I guess that goes even down to the next layer of the foundation is, are you looking after yourself first? Because if you can't pay your bills and everything, it's like you may as well fire after your needs. Like you do need those basic things as much as we would like to offer everything for free or whatever it might be. You need that foundation for yourself before you can even start to move into these life and be of service to others as well.
Absolutely. And you're the model, you're the example.
Yeah.
That it's not wrong to ask to get paid for your service. It's actually very unhealthy for both people to offer something for free. Like it's not a healthy exchange. So doing these, this yoga for free stuff is just, it's created, I think it was created for the intention could be good if it's for actually a community that can't afford it. But like, for example, I'm from Miami, and there's like free yoga in this, like in downtown Miami, in an area that's like affluent. Like people can pay for it. Allow people to pay to vote for yoga with their money, right? Like that's what you're voting for. Your money is where you're saying what's valuable to you, right? Part of it is like allowing that to happen, because then there's also a value that's placed on it, and you can maintain your job. And so it's part, and that's also training you're training other people how to treat you, right? So there's a lot of relationship to money that yoga teachers have to heal as well, which is part of the program that all comes from, and why, a lot of things, which myself, I had to do as well.
Yeah, there's a strange sort of undercurrent that money's somehow evil or something, but it's just an energetic exchange. It was two things, and that's the currency that we need to, again, pay for our bills and do all of those things. And that's not evil. There might be some people that use it for evil purposes, but we're not going to do that. So, yeah.
Yeah, no. I mean, money is just an amplifier. Like if you're already a generous person, you're going to use it more for generous things. If you're a selfish person, you're going to use it for more selfish things. It's the same.
Yeah, it's not just going to suddenly transform you into something that you're not. Awesome. So how can people kind of connect with you and learn more if this is something that they're interested in, diving into philosophy and things?
And things, all the things. Obviously, if you want to have a conversation or want to get to know me more, you can go to the website, rinayoga.com. If you specifically want to learn more about the program, I do have a free training that you can look up, careerinyoga.com/training, and that will take you right to the video. You can sign up and watch that like right after this if you like. And then we can also have a conversation. So if you want to schedule a time to talk and see if this is the right program for you and see if this is the right fit, then you can actually go to careerinyoga.com/apply. Then that just takes you right to scheduling a phone call with me, and we can see if this is something that you'd like to do further. Because the whole thing is also, understanding that if it's the right fit, it's going to work. If it's not the right fit, it won't work. And that's part of why I have conversations with people to see where they're at. And I can usually assess this is a good, or this might not work, right? Depending on what you're looking for. So I like to be honest and real that way as well.
Love that. And my rapid fire question for the end. If you could time to yourself in the first year of becoming a business owner and entrepreneur, what advice would you give to yourself?
Rapid fire. Oh my gosh. The first thing that comes to mind is you can do it in the way that, I mean, I guess the thing would be to stay true to yourself in terms of like to thine own self be true. But I know as cheesy as it is this is where money and business, depending on how the yoga business, the yoga industry, if you will, is still an industry. So I have met many people on both sides, right? The warm, cuddly ones with great intentions and the not so warm, cuddly ones with not so great intentions. And so there's moments I got caught up in that and to just not being true to myself because that wasn't my nature. But I thought that's how it was. And then I was like, no, it's not. So being true to yourself is highly important in this process because the moment you sell out and the moment you do something because you think this is what you're supposed to do, society tells you to do it, it's not going to work. It's never going to work. I would have never thought that 24 years later, I would be able to offer a program like this to yoga teachers, helping them merge, like bridge the philosophy with business when literally, I mean, I studied marketing in college and I loved philosophy so much. It's always been infused in my teachings, but I never understood like really how much the power of it eventually now that is what everyone's seeking. So there was a truth there that I held on to. There's moments I let it go and then catching it up again. Stay true to yourself because nobody else knows you but you. And even when everybody was like, doing things that I could have become popular for or whatever for, I just said, that's not me. I'm so glad it works for them. It's not me. Staying in that lane is really, really important.
That is great advice for the end. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rina. And we've had all of the links that we've mentioned in the show notes for everyone, so you can go check all of those books and everything out. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
You
Look
too.
forward to you soon.